Hi, and welcome to the Perfect Franchise Podcast. My name is Kris Simonich, and my co host is Andrea Floyd. And on this podcast, we try to parse apart some of the best practices from some of the industry's sharpest minds. Today, we have CEO and founder Dan Claps of Voda Cleaning and Restoration. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on, Dan. Dan, let's start out a little bit with your background. I know you have a background in franchise lead generation, or how did that really inform you and take you in the direction that you're in now?
Sure. Um, it's funny. I always say that I can teach people how to build a business because I can also teach you how to not build a business because I've made a lot of mistakes. I got into business pretty much right out of high school. I went right into starting a side hustle that turned into a business. But I really discovered franchising in 2014. I was in my early 20s. I wanted to learn more about how to run a business properly. Franchising seemed to be a really great way to do that. And so I got my start in the franchise industry in 2014 with the franchise called Murphy Business and Financial. And they taught you how to help other people buy and sell businesses as a business broker. So I started with them, did that for about a year and a half. And I realized that my passion and my skill set really centered around lead generation. Um, and quite frankly, I think I was swimming a little bit, upstream. Being at such an early stage of my career, it was difficult coaching and consulting people on buying a business when I didn't even really, have start my career yet. And so, lead generation was really where I thrived. And so, in 2016, I started a lead generation company in the franchise space for franchise consultants and franchisors, and we built that company for about 7 years before it was acquired, and got my start into being a franchisor about 18 months ago.
That's great. And so you start this lead generation company and you're generating leads for other businesses. And then you're thinking, how do I do this for a business that I own? And so is that kind of how you led into that next step?
Yeah, what happened was I would see so many of my company's leads go on and buy different types of franchises because that was a big part of what we did was finding people like what you guys do, find someone who wants to own a business and connect them to franchises. And there were times where sometimes my lead flow would lead to 70 or 80 different territories purchased by my company through the leads to a certain franchisor, and that franchisor would go on and be this massive company. And I felt like, you're exactly right, Andrea. Maybe I could do this for myself. In retrospect, probably a bit naive to what that really meant, but I did have this vision of starting a franchisor, and that was kind of where we got started.
Yeah, well, a healthy amount of naivete is exactly what all entrepreneurs need, right? If you knew everything, you might be a little bit more cautious jumping in, right? Okay, so you're a young guy, you do very well in the franchise lead generation space, you decide you want to be a franchisor. Um, but that's one decision. The next decision is what industry do I want to franchise in? What kind of franchise do I want to have? Talk to me about that and then how you ended up with Voda.
Yeah. Well, and you're exactly right, Kris. I mean, I always tell people vote is the best thing I've ever done in my career, and I'm so glad I did it. If you told me all the, mountains and valleys I would have to go through before, I don't know if I would have done it, right? So it's like sometimes being a little bit underprepared can be helpful. But it's like being in love, right? Like I'm in love with Voda so much that I'm okay with the challenges. But if I hadn't built that relationship with the company prior, I don't know if I'd be able to do it. Um, well, I knew I wanted to be in home services because I just always felt like, it's a low investment. It's a very much lead and sales driven type of business. So home services really screamed out to me. I heard a Richard Branson quote during my like deciding what to do phase after exiting my previous business, which was, and if you don't know Richard Branson to me, is the billionaires want to be. He's got like a pretty good life. He seems to be pretty family oriented and balanced. And Richard Branson said, if you want to build a great company, go find the number two guy at the number one company and ask him to be your partner. And so I realized pretty quickly that while I had a lot of theory from 10 years in franchising and the capital to go and do something, I had not ever run a franchisor and had that experience. And so really my first step was bringing on our co-founder and COO Zach Nolte, who runs Voda day to day because he had been a franchisor for over a decade. So that was like step number one.
Yeah.
Then we built a team around that. Then we looked at what industry to go into.
Interesting. So you had the team first. You're like, we're going to do something together, guys. Not sure what it is.
Yeah, I mean, what happened was, so I sold my business in May 2022. It was a good exit. It wasn't like I'm not retiring on a boat or anything, is what I always say. And that capital was burning a hole in my pocket, if you will. I remember like my dad saying, like, what are you going to buy with that? And I said, I didn't make any money. This is capital. It's going to go from, my personal account to this business account. And so we built a team between Zach, me, our CMO Christian, our VP of development, Steve Miller. And I remember going to a family barbecue and my family saying, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, who are all these people? You got a CMO, a COO, a VP. I think I had an outsourced controller, and we didn't even have a business. But what I knew is if we built the right team, we put the right people on the bus in the right seats, then we could decide where to go. And that's really what we did. Then we looked at, you know, painting and roofing and plumbing and restoration before we settled on being in the restoration space.
Sounds very Field of Dreams, right? Did you hear that Field of Dreams quote in there? Build it and they will come.
Right.
That's
Sorry, Chris.
definitely that scene is etched in my memory from childhood for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, how did you settle on restoration though, Dan? After you looked at everything, that's where you ended up. So why was that?
Yeah, one day we got smart and we took a piece of paper and we wrote down what we called, the playbook. And we said, forget about the industry. What do we want out of a business? And the most important elements that we wanted was number one, a business that was a need, not a want, right? A recession, COVID, a war, God forbid, couldn't affect the business. Number two, we wanted a business that was a growing industry, not shrinking. We wanted a business where the labor pool was a non-skilled labor pool, meaning anyone with a good attitude and good with their hands could do the work. We wanted a business where the average ticket and average revenues in the industry were high because that would allow us to be able to create a predictable lead flow. Meaning, if your average ticket's $500, you can only spend, $100 on lead acquisition to get a customer. If your average ticket's, $3,700, you could spend a lot more to get a customer, and that could, leverage the lead gen background. And then finally, we wanted an industry where we felt like it could lead to a business where the owner could eventually run the business without being too much in the day to day, which margins play a big component. Right? If you're going to pay a royalty and managers and everything else, you have to have enough of a margin to do that. So restoration kind of screamed out at us based on all of that. But there was one negative, one caveat, which was while there's 14,000 water jobs a day in America, if there isn't water or mold or fire, in your town today, then there's no business that day, right? And so we loved the fact that at Voda we also do cleaning, floor cleaning, which gives us some predictable revenue, and it's there for not for a rainy day, right? Because we have lots of jobs on a rainy day, but maybe on a sunny day, right? When there's no floods, we've got the cleaning side of the business.
That's great. Yeah, that two models in one. So, Dan, one of the things that I've read before, there's a report that comes out annually. It talks about sort of the state of the restoration industry. Tell us a little bit about the market in general and what are you looking at as you get into this restoration business and then you're tacking on the cleaning piece?
Well, I love that you read that report. It's a great report that comes out, and one last thing I'll say on restoration is what we found was that ServPro is a massive company, great company. They've been in business since like the '60s. If someone thinks about restoration, they say, "What about ServPro?" Including me. I remember people saying like, "What about ServPro? It's competitive." The reality is, ServPro is a massive company. They do probably about $3 billion in revenue a year in a $300 billion industry. And so it's actually a very fragmented industry. We're not really competing with them. We're competing with a lot of mom and pops. Um, Restoration in the broadest terms is anything to do with like restoring a property. So that can include rebuilding and mold and fire, smoke. Water mitigation is a $17 billion industry. and they're growing about 5% year over year. Um, and so all those things screamed out at us. And then really what I thought about was, I've been franchising since like yogurt shops were the next big thing. And when I looked at restoration, and I had placed clients in restoration, it's something that's never really changed. It's always been a consistent revenue producing business throughout, I mean, really throughout history, right? We've had water damage for a very, very long time, and we probably will continue to. So I felt like it was a stable space to look at.
That's great. So then, thinking about that, so that's obviously a really big business. You're tying in the cleaning piece so that you're saying on those sort of days that you don't have something to do with the restoration. How do they sort of complement each other? And are you having the same customers or are they different customers?
Yeah, so what's really unique about Voda as a franchise offering is that we have the two franchises in one. It's really two revenue streams in one business, but they complement each other. And so when you go out and you need to get restoration work, no matter what anyone tells you about like getting leads, we have a great lead process. At the end of the day, if you're a home service owner, whether it's restoration, painting, plumbing, roofing, it doesn't matter. You have to be what I call the mayor of the town. You have to go out there and you have to network, or someone in your team needs to do that. Someone has to locally sell, right? If we didn't need that, I would open up 120 corporate stores. And we need something from a franchise owner, which is that leader and that local presence, right? And so when you go and you meet a property manager or you meet a plumber, especially with a property manager, the normal restoration provider says, "Hey, if anything ever goes wrong, I'm here. I can help you." Whereas we're able to say, "Hey, we're here to help you when there's something that goes wrong, but let us clean your floors for now." If we're building a relationship on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, it's a lot easier for us to get in with that property manager when a water event inevitably does happen. And so cleaning doesn't only provide a revenue stream immediately, but it also gets our foot in the door for those larger restoration jobs.
So one of the things that I think we hear a lot about when we talk about restorations with our clients is relationships with insurance companies. And I never know what to think, Dan. I think some people think they're just going to, if they buy a restoration franchise, they're going to just kick their feet up on the desk and insurance companies are just going to send them a bunch of business. I know enough to know that's not true, but what is the reality? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kris. I think like at the end of the day, people are thinking about five things when they buy a franchise. Number one is how are they going to get customers, right? That's key. That's the number one thing. And how's the franchisor going to support me? Which that question leads to, and I'll answer it in a moment. But I think the second thing they think about is how are they going to get employees to service the customer. Three, there's already restoration or whatever business in my market. How does this one stand out? Like, what's the unique selling proposition? Four, what are the numbers? And then five, is the day in the life of the owner going to match what I want out of a business? When it comes to the customer side, it's funny, everyone asks about the insurance question. So there's a couple things. First thing, we have a really dialed in lead generation machine. That's my background. We have a program called Flood It, right? If you want to go fast in a car, you floor it. Well, if you want to get leads, we've got to get you flooded with leads. We do all the Facebook ads, Google local service ads, Google My Business, everything related to online digital marketing. But there's no magic bullet. And so while you're getting leads online for the person that Google's, here's the thing: people don't Google, water restoration near me. They Google my ceiling tiles leaking. What do I do? And they spell things wrong because they're in a panic. There's about 35,000 keywords when it comes to water restoration. It's the second hardest business to generate leads online next to body injury attorneys. I'd argue franchise consulting's probably up there too, but it's a small amount of people searching. And so we've been fortunate because of our growth and expedited pace to partner with some really great restoration lead vendors who, in my opinion, are the best in the world to help us there too. The second way you get customers is through referrals through property managers and plumbers. The plumber goes to fix the leak and then they refer the restoration company. So that's a big part. And by the way, all of this is paid for by insurance, most of it. Then you've got the third element, which is insurance paid jobs, or excuse me, insurance referred jobs. I don't know along the lines where that became such a like everyone thinks that's how it works. I'll break down how it happens, and this is probably really too much information, but insurance companies are not in the restoration business. Okay, if right now you had a water event in your town and you call your insurance and John the restorer is not available, they need multiple options, right? And so what insurance companies have realized is they can't be in the quality assurance business of making sure all these different restoration companies are upholding their standards, right? And so what happened is there's these companies that are called TPAs, third party administrators, that essentially are like a broker or like a Grand Central Station of restoration companies, matching them to insurance. So can we do TPA work? Absolutely. Whether you're a ServPro, another brand, or a Voda, a lot of these TPAs, it has nothing to do with how long the franchisor's been around. It has to do with your independent business. So no matter what, some of those TPAs are going to take a couple years of proven financials to get on with. There's others that we have relationships with to get on. And then finally, there's national accounts, which as we expand, we've been working towards. Um, it really comes down to a mix of all of these areas. And what I tell people is the insurance work sounds a lot better than it is. It's a bit like a drug dealer, to be candid. Uh, Excuse my analogy, but if you think about a TPA, they're like, "Hey, Kris, you just opened your business. Here's some work for free. Go do it, and you just pay us back, a percentage of the revenue." Well, what happens is you start to get like you've got your crew doing that work, you've got money out for that work, they give you more work and they get you a little bit more hooked. And next thing you know, your whole business is tethered to this lower profit, insurance work. And so us as a franchisor, we could have said, "Hey, great, go ahead, go do low revenue, or excuse me, low profit work. We're making our royalties." I don't think that's the way to run a business. We look at franchisee unit economics as our number one North Star. And so sorry for the long-winded answer, but we actually try really hard to keep franchise owners off of the TPA work and more on the online marketing and the local marketing.
Yeah. I'm glad I asked. That's a great answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's helpful. Can I clarify one thing, Dan? So the work is still paid for by insurance and the bulk of it's just how you're obtaining the work. And is that really the difference that I'm hearing between those kind of categories of kind of going after TPA work versus marketing yourself? It's still going to be paid for the customer. They're still going to go through insurance.
Well, that's what I love about the business, right? It's a third party paying. Most homeowner policies basically state that if you don't solve the water damage within your home, right, like they'll take you off the policy, and so you have to solve it. And I forget the statistic, but it's some substantial, high 90s% that homeowners have homeowners insurance, and so Florida can be a challenging place at times. You're seeing a lot more in Florida, a lot more self pay because they actually would rather pay out of pocket because of the amount their premiums could go up. But that's a very special circumstance. Across the normal footprint, most jobs are paid for by insurance.
Got it. That helps. That helps. Dan, let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about sort of the franchisee. And I think you hit on a little bit the mayor of the town, but tell me, who's your ideal franchise owner?
You don't want to learn more about insurance?
No, I
I'm
think we're
just
done
kidding.
with insurance. We got it.
Um, it's funny. I'm thorough to a fault. I probably gave you guys too much, but that's the insurance side of the business. So, yeah. So I think Voda's been successful. I'll tell you a story really quick and how we got to here. Um, I launched. We acquired Voda from the founder, who's still a partner in the business and an incredible, instrumental part of our business. His name is Dragon. The story's pretty cool. He moved here from Serbia in 2004, didn't speak a lick of English, was a lifeguard, worked his way up, eventually became a security guard in a nightclub. Meets his wife in the nightclub. She's a electrical engineer for the Pentagon, and one thing leads to another. They get engaged, and he quits this nightclub because he says, this is not a place I'm going to work. Raising a family or soon to be family. But as he's leaving in his final weeks there, there's a gentleman that's always in the nightclub, always seems to be there with lots of money, multiple times a week. And he says, "What do you do? I'd love to, work for you." And the guy that's there is in the cleaning business. This is in 2006, I want to say. And so he ends up doing cleaning and restoration with this owner. That owner goes overseas and says, "You know what? Let's split the profits. You run the business." Kind of like a franchise to a degree. He was getting training wheels. Um, That person eventually, I guess, maybe moves back to overseas, and Dragon in 2009 says, you know what, it's time for me to go on my own. So he starts a cleaning business, and from 2009 to 2022, just builds the business from the ground up. Real American dream, amazing lifestyle. We partnered up in 2000, the end of 2022, well, early 2023, rebranded the company, launched in April of 2023 as a franchise offering. And what's interesting about the story is, we thought like every other franchise out there, we'll be the next big franchise. There's about 300 new franchises a year, 300 fail a year. 3% of franchisors ever get to 100 territories, and it takes 10 years. And so we launched, and me thinking, we're going to be the next big thing, invest several millions of dollars into the business. I personally guarantee my home, real estate, all kinds of things, go all in. And we launched in April of 2023, and no one buys our franchise. May passes, no one buys. June passes, no one buys. I had a 3-year relationship at the time. My girlfriend at that time, I think she saw it was a sinking ship. She left. Like things were getting a little rough.
Yep.
Um, and I what's that?
No, that's funny. That's funny. Oh, everything's coming down. It's like your clients, all the restoration issues. Everything's just drowning, right?
It's coming at us, and I'm not maybe showing it, but I'm losing about 70 grand a month, and thinking like, with franchising, you either take off or you don't. There's really no like middle ground. And I thought, maybe I missed the mark somewhere, that no one is buying our franchise. I go to a conference, I see a gentleman that owns a large trampoline park tell his story of, basically, you have to go through hell when you launch a franchise, or he almost went bankrupt. Says to his wife, honey, the difference between us being broke and super broke is pretty much the same. We might as well go all in. And that hit me right in the chest. I went home, put more money into the business, and maybe Field of Dreams build it if you come. I'm not sure, but July 2nd we sell our first franchise, then another and another. Now we're at 120 units 12 months later and 50 owners. The story though is important, because I think what happened was, one day we decided exactly who we wanted in an owner, and we said no to everything else. And so we only look for what we call the mayor of the town. And that's someone that likes to sell. They like people, they like networking, they like to schmooze. Like, that's who we want. We don't want anyone else. We only want the mayor of the town in the Voda system.
Got it.
That's great. Mhm.
One of the things that I think a lot of people wonder is, what's it look like on day one? So if I'm the new franchisee, I'm the mayor of the town, I got that. But just to start, who else was with me? Who's working for me? Talk to me about what that first day infrastructure looks like.
Sure. So, the business is going to start with you as the owner, and then you're going to have an operations manager who's really responsible for the day to day of the business. We have a program called Talent Scout, which will actually find you an operations manager or GM, depending on what you want to call the title, through our program. You'll obviously decide who you hire. It's your business, but we have a way to find, proper operations manager with restoration experience to run the day to day. So that's number one. The operations manager can do the day to day work when you first start. We don't want owners cleaning carpets or extracting water, even from day one. And so the operations manager will do that. And then once they've gotten a little bit of, experience, just to kind of get the market going, they'll hire a lead tech. I'm a big believer in hire the director of engineers, then they'll hire the engineers. And so you hire the operations manager, then they hire the lead tech, then you're going to scale your techs as you grow. Other than that, you need an administrative person that could either be outsourced, it could be a spouse, it could be you. Um, and then you need sales. Now, that can either be the owner, which is obviously ideal, or they can hire a salesperson. But if they're going to hire a salesperson, the capital outlay is going to be a bit more. So to recap, owner, operations manager, technicians, administrative, and then sales, or someone fills that seat.
Got it.
Okay, so you're
Got it.
looking at a
Thank
couple
you.
employees. So that's great, sort of
Yeah.
building that team out. So, Dan, you've built your team, you've started it. Tell us, what's going to be the hardest part as a franchisee in running this business and building it up?
Yeah. I think the best answer that I can give you is, I'm from New Jersey. I'm a bit candid, but I'm gonna say it. I think that people go into owning a business sometimes with this mentality of leapfrogging the progress they're going to see. Meaning they worked for 20 years for someone else. They worked their tail off. They missed a lot of baseball games, kids' events. They saved up money. They got an SBA loan. They bought this business. They made it. And it's like, we just need you to give us 18 months of what you gave that job. Don't go swinging the golf club on Tuesday mornings right away. That's my biggest thing. Like, just give us 18 months of working as hard as you did for someone else. Doesn't mean you're cleaning carpets or extracting water, but I think my biggest thing I see in franchising across the board is people kind of just jumping ahead. I saw the same when I was in the lead gen space training franchise consultants. Sometimes they would get a little bit excited or drunk on the freedom too. I think that if people can just buy a franchise and say, I'm going to work 9 to 5, like in the dedicated, I'm going to follow the playbook, I'm going to do whatever I'm asked to do it from the franchise for 18 months, they'll have a whole different life. If they don't do that, I think they just kind of slow the growth that they could have substantially over the longer term.
That's
Yeah,
great. Thanks.
that's a great point, Dan. I that exact point, I compare it in my own personal experience. I don't usually talk about this, Andrew. You don't know this, but I've written a couple books, haven't
Ooh,
been published,
didn't
and
know
that
that.
and that's the point. Is you start out going, this is going to be a Herculean feat. I'm going to write this book, but when you're done with that and you do it, and you're like, yes, you find out that was the easy part. Like getting somebody to
Right.
take you on and publish, that's even harder. So, getting through those 20 years in corporate America, saving up the money, buying the franchise, you've written the book. But now there's a next
Yeah.
level to this, right?
I think that's a great analogy. I think history repeats itself too, right? Like, I mean, remember getting out of college and being like, that's it, easy street.
That's
Yep.
right.
And it's like,
Seriously.
wait a minute, it just started.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I had little kids with diapers, people with kids in high school would say, don't worry, it only gets harder. And I was like, how could that be? How could that be? But guess what? They were right. They were right.
Yep.
So, real quick, Dan, before we wrap up, 2 rapid fire questions for you. So, the first is if you could tell one thing, say one thing to somebody looking at franchises right now, not necessarily Voda, but just any franchise, they're seriously contemplating franchising. What's one piece of advice you'd give them?
I would say, how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time, I think is the saying. Pick up the phone, go to, theperfectfranchise.com, fill out the application, do some calls. Most good franchisors are not going to try to just like push you to buy their franchise. They're going to see if you're a good fit. Consultants like yourselves are, going to help people identify if they're a fit or not. I'm sure you tell people a lot that they're not a fit for franchising. And so, I think just like take the step, take one step would be my advice.
All right, great. And so the next question would be if you're talking to somebody who just started their franchise, they're in their first year, maybe first month, what would you like to tell them?
Um, I would say find a way to recognize that you're always going to have that nervousness that you have, no matter how big your business is. I think like enjoying the uncomfortableness is my like being grateful. Like the day that your truck breaks down and you're laughing with your GM that like somehow you got to the job on time, like you will. Now it doesn't seem like it, but you'll look back and those will be like the good old days. So just enjoy that because no matter what, it's going to kind of suck in the beginning anyway. You might as well like kind of enjoy the process because eventually you're gonna have a big business and people are not gonna be like this, this little tiny community where everyone like my original team. Thankfully, we're all together as a company and we've maintained this kind of startup culture. But as we hire more people, like they're great, but they're never gonna be like the day one people, right? Hopefully, they feel like they are, and that's great. But I guess my point is like enjoy those early days because like you got what you wished for, right? Like if your plate is full, like you wanted to eat, right? So like, don't be upset that your plate's full, because that's getting you to where you wanted to go. And remember why you're doing this in the first place, because the first month, 3 months, 6 months, no matter what franchise, it's going to be a little bit emotional.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. Dan, this has been great. I think as we hear a little bit about your history, I think one of the biggest messages, whether it's you starting Voda with your team or whether you're bringing a franchisee and you're telling them what to do, the message we heard from you is build the team first. And, you know, we jokingly said the field of dreams, but I think I've heard that message both on the front end of you even developing Voda. Come with all the right people, the right leadership team, and then figure out the what. And I think the other big piece that I heard about Voda is all the different characteristics of what you were looking for. That's the type of things we do as we're trying to match clients. Are you looking for something recurring revenue? Are you looking for something recession proof? What are the type of businesses that are truly a fit? And I think that's really where you came together and found a good combination of a business that does both restoration and cleaning. So that was really great. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate that. And for those of you listening, if you're considering franchising as a potential path to business ownership, remember, there's no one size fits all to franchising that suits everyone. Even so, there's certainly a franchise out there that's perfect for you. To explore options and find your perfect match, please visit us at theperfectfranchise.com. By clicking on Let's Talk, you can schedule time to speak with one of the consultants on our team. We look forward to connecting with you again on our next episode. Until then, take care.